Olmec Art at the La Venta Museum, Mexico, the full series. At the entrance to the La Venta Park Museum in Villahermosa, you're greeted by a bust of archaeologist Carlos Pellicer Cámara and 3 Olmec sculptures. The La Venta Park Museum has one of the world's most important collections of monumental works from the Olmecs, among the earliest civilizations of Mesoamerica. The 3 sculptures here represent the human, animal, and hybrid images that will be represented by the numerous pieces within the Park Museum, an open sculpture gallery of masterpieces from the archaeological site of La Venta. They are set in various stations spaced along the walkway, shaded with gardens of cacao, ceiba, and other plants native to the state of Tabasco, to create a natural ambience recalling the wilderness surrounding the ancient Olmec world. And while the museum is attached to a small zoo of local wildlife, most of the birdsong in the background comes from animals free to roam the park. I'll be silent for a few so you can hear them. In this playlist, we will explore and explain pieces I selected in their order along the museum's main path. One of Mesoamerica's first major cities, La Venta flourished from 900 to 400 BC. Many of the works in this playlist will emphasize the overlap of royal and sacred imagery that merged among the Olmec, a belief that would prevail in Mesoamerica up to the conquest. We are coming up to the first piece on the museum circuit, a low-relief sculpture nicknamed El Caminante, or the Walker, a subtle relief carving showing early hieroglyphs in front of a man walking his trail. And we too will walk these trails to discover lessons from the Olmec. The first episode will show examples of the massive monolithic works that have come to identify the civilization. Join us for it. Over 2,000 years ago, the Olmec at La Venta were using natural materials to create works of luxurious art and architecture. Here at the La Venta Park Museum, scores of these 5 or 6-sided basalt columns were lined up to their original arrangement, which created a boundary walling off a ritual area of the ancient settlement. Commentary at the museum noted that these columns were natural formations that were most likely collected from Punta Partida in southern Veracruz between 700 and 400 BC. Workers then rafted, hauled, and planted these pieces vertically into the ground at the north end of La Venta's ceremonial center. There they formed a square perimeter, enclosing a plaza just south of the northernmost ritual mound. At La Venta, the Olmec also used these natural columns to build this entire structure, a tomb that is also popularly called the Jaguar House. Olmec builders set up 43 monolithic pieces into 4 walls and a slanted ceiling, all to contain the crude limestone slab within the space. Upon the slab were 2 funerary bundles with the decayed remains of what may have been 2 young people. Much like the stone columns, a variety of pieces crafted from natural materials were also deposited within the tomb, including hematite, jade, obsidian, and even a shark tooth. Red residue found at this monument suggests cinnabar, a mercury ore that was prized among the ancient Olmec and later among the Maya, who used this precious yet toxic mineral to decorate fine art and royal burials. I started this video by walking along the first of the 2 reconstructed walls in this part of the park, and here is the second. Like the former, this one retains its corner, which I pass as I continue upon the Park Museum's paved walkway. The museum caption indicates that these walls functioned to separate sacred ritual space from other parts of La Venta's urban center. Now I am coming upon one of the several colossal, monolithic heads that have been built as monuments for La Venta and were relocated to the Park Museum. This one, technically known as La Venta Monument 3, is nicknamed the Young Warrior. Prominent ear spools accentuate the figure's regal status. Its rough, porous complexion is a quality of the volcanic basalt stone distinct to the Sotiapan region of southern Veracruz, hinting at the manpower needed to haul this enormous piece over almost 80 miles to reach La Venta. It was one of 3 heads set up near the city's north end, as if to signal its entrance. Although a highlight of the colossal Olmec heads is a unique headdress that helps identify each individual figure, most likely a chief, this one is unusual for its glaring absence of such a piece. Instead, we see a surface riddled with deep cuts, which may have been deliberate, as we will see in later parts of this playlist. The sharp, rapid squeaking you are hearing is coming from the Coatimundis, the true owners of the park. As the sun was starting to set behind the thick tropical garden, bands of Coatimundis were coming out to make their rounds across the park. They are guiding me down the path to the next piece for this playlist on the Olmec sculpture of La Venta. I'll walk around the colossal head named the Old Warrior for a detailed look at its features as they represent common traits in this artistic tradition. Join us for it. The first thing to notice on this monolithic Olmec head is the formidable bird's foot atop the cap. You can see 3 long toes grasping over the headpiece and ending in sharp claws. This crest uniquely identifies the ruler depicted in the massive sculpture. While the last video from the La Venta playlist featured the colossal head depicting the so-called young warrior, this episode looks at the old warrior, the popular name for La Venta Colossal Head 4. I am walking around this massive piece, sculpted from a single basalt stone, to point out its three-dimensional scope. Decoration surrounds the work, including the bands and feathery flaps over the back of the cap and the spoked spools hanging from the ruler's ears. Museum commentary notes that the stone was identified as sourced from Cerro Sintepec in the Tuzlas range of Veracruz. It was finally positioned as one of the three heads at La Venta's north entrance, which included the one from the last episode. As we return to the face, notice its realistic contours and look closely for teeth behind the upper lip. The next episode in the series will look at our first throne platform sculpture at La Venta, so we will see you there. Who are the mysterious children on this ancient Olmec altar? The first of these rests in the arms of a ruler sitting in a cave's mouth, a threshold between the surface, the world of the living, and the underworld, the realm of creation. In surprising convention, Olmec sculpture often portrays a man instead of the expected mother holding the infant. Two more children appear on the right side, each in the arms of a ruler wearing ornate headdresses and ear spools. All five children on this altar have unusually shaped faces and heads, suggesting that they are not human infants, but rather mythical beings, with features that could represent the jaguar. From the site of La Venta, this monolithic block is elaborately carved on three sides. The upper surface was most likely a flat platform on which Olmec priests could give altar offerings, or even a chief could sit upon as a throne. And on this last turn, two more figures carry sacred children. Notice the one at right, whose head curves into a clefted surface, representing the sowing of grains into the earth. The next episode will show similar details in an exquisite work nicknamed The Governor. The Governor sculpture of La Venta is an elegant example of freestanding stone sculpture, which the Olmec were the first in Mesoamerica to master. This basalt figure portrays a seated man dressed in fineries, such as a jeweled chest piece and belt, both featuring a large X, similar to the hieroglyphic sign for Venus. From the sides we can appreciate new details on this work. The governor's imposing cape, draping from his shoulders to the ground, shows hems and knots binding the piece together. On the crown, several large spots appear, making this figure another from La Venta to relate the chiefly power of the Olmec with the mystical power of the jaguar. And, following the museum's commentary, on this final turn we should notice the zigzagged ornament hanging from the crown's edge. Art scholars have suggested that this represents pleats of folded native paper. The museum adds that this detail is noteworthy because similar designs appear on freestanding sculptures from other Olmec sites, such as the spout from San Lorenzo and the mythical twins from Azusul, both in southern Veracruz. Our next stop along the Venta Park Museum trail will have owls, and we will meet again there. While not the most prominent animal in Olmec art, owls do sometimes appear. The so-called Tecolote altar of La Venta is named for the great horned owls that feature in low relief around this basalt sculpture. The museum caption points out that the stonework is unusual for its original contours, which the artist just carved upon rather than cutting into an artificial shape. It adds that the owl and human figures around the piece seem to be a procession for the scene's main subject, the literal head of this work. Now that we are turning to the front side of the sculpture, I will slow the camera. If you saw the previous video on the altar of the children, you may remember the Lord sitting in the cave niche. A large head appears here instead. Its closed eyes suggest that the subject has died, which would fit the idea of owls as omens of death. Two humans on the sides are pointing with raised hands toward the top of the central arch. The next episode in the Venta Park Museum trail will look at a curious freestanding monkey gazing toward the sky. Join us for it. Who is this ancient Olmec figure, and what is it looking at? Mysteries surround this standing piece like my circumambulation. The Venta Park Museum propped this sculpture to a standing position, and for decades scholars read a celestial view from the figure's upward gaze. Like many of the famed colossal Olmec heads, was this meant to look to the heavens for signs and reflections? If it were a standing sculpture, it seems incomplete, for its lower half is lacking details. From a previous episode you may remember the governor sculpture, which was fully carved into a seated human form. The belly and legs are missing from this column, so it may have instead been a horizontally embedded tendon, its architectural support. So rather than looking up to the sky, it may have been set to watch the horizon. While the crafted figure may be a person, consensus says it is a monkey. Monkeys are very rare in Olmec art, despite their preponderance in Tabasco's tropical wild. It makes the work all the more exceptional. Its hands hold the back of the head, bearing a comically smug smile. Join us for a walk through a sculpture garden of Olmec works in the next episode. Did the Olmec damage their own sculptures on purpose? This question has intrigued scholars of the ancient civilization, whose massive works were often found mutilated or even broken. I am walking through a sculpture garden of dilapidated pieces at the Venta Park Museum. Notice that some of them have parts broken off, in some cases beyond recognition. Others have grooves or pits in specific places, pointing to deliberate demolition. If the Olmec themselves were defacing their own works, the question would be, why? The answer to this could be related to similar ideas from my video on Yaqui myth and dance in Sonora, Mexico. After the community's Holy Week dances, the participants removed the ritual costumes and threw them into a pile for burning. Because the dances and other actions had accumulated so much power, the accoutrements were overcharged and therefore dangerous to keep in the village, so the Yaqui freed the excess by conflagration. The Olmec perhaps had similar beliefs about ritual sculptures becoming too powerful. When a chief died or a ceremony ended, the Olmec could have removed symbols from bladed objects to release their inherent energy and thus protect the community from overload. If earlier readings of this Olmec monument are correct, then I am starting this episode with an ancestor spirit. The seated man is supporting a rope upon his left arm and pointing with his right hand, perhaps guiding the viewer to follow the rope's path. So I turn around the angle to match the rope's direction toward the domineering figure sitting at front center. As you may remember from previous episodes of the La Venta playlist, this is a lord seated in front of a rounded niche symbolizing a cave, a threshold between above and below, life and death, emergence and descent. A fascinating detail about this figure is how he holds the rope, possibly indicating mystical lineage with his ancestors. This is the so-called Triumphal altar. On its other side are two indentations that most likely helped position the massive sculpture as wooden posts were inserted. Breakage around the lower half may have come from the Olmec themselves. One final noteworthy element is the overhead face of a giant, otherworldly beast with oval eyes, terrible fangs, and outspread wings. It seems to situate the Olmec lord as an agent in mythical space-time. Join us as we conclude our tour of La Venta Park Museum with today's mask. By fortuitous chance, today's mask was a final recording during my walk through the La Venta Park Museum. Buried 4 meters deep in the earth north of La Venta's mountain-shaped central pyramid, this enigmatic mosaic is among the most mysterious works from the ancient Olmec civilization, and it was one of 3 discovered in the center of La Venta. Olmec artists stacked 485 serpentine stone slabs into a square, over 15 feet on each side. Archaeologists have interpreted the unusual design as the face of a rattlesnake, perhaps combined with jaguar or bird symbols. The 4 diamonds on the top row would then relate to patterns found on rattlesnake skin. It most likely related to water as part of new religious practices introduced early in La Venta's history. Since its ritual burial, this elaborate mosaic mask lay hidden from mortal view for almost 3,000 years, for only the spirit world and their priestly delegates to engage with. Please like, share, and subscribe to the Eye of the Serpent channel. Your support goes toward travel, research, and production. Thank you for following me on this Olmec Museum tour, and good roads.